And that brings us to our lead story of the day regarding the White House redefining literally what a recession is. So if you see 2 consecutive quarters on a general rule of thumb with a negative GDP growth and everything's rescinding, then you are by definition into a recession. But the White House doesn't want to do that. You have Janet Yellen coming out, the Treasury Secretary, saying, oh, we're just in a transition of slow growth. Okay, so you want to kind of elaborate on that rather than it being so general? What does that mean? Well, we have the capabilities, lady, to look at the numbers and actually see what's going on. So you're not going to gaslight us. You're not going to sit there and redefine things and get away with it. And that's what they're trying to do. Even their own people, MSNBC, CNN, aren't really following this whole charade that they're trying to do, this clown show, theater show that they're putting on for all of us. So it's ridiculous, and it makes sense why they want to do it, at least on a political standpoint and a PR standpoint. I mean, they have a litany of negatives. They have a list of problems that they have to deal with that they just can't solve, or they're not willing to solve, i.e. immigration, inflation. You have rising gas prices, you have the oil issue, you have the Iran issue, you have the Russia issue, you have the China issue. I mean, it's thing after thing. So they don't want to just keep tacking on things. Now that we're going into recession, it's just something new. So what are they going to do? They're just going to redefine it for us, folks. And they're going to double down, which is what we're about to see here with this clip, with Peter Doocy acknowledging it here in this interview. You're going to see them talk about something before, but I promise we'll get to the moment in the segment where she redefines it, and she's going to say, oh, well, that's not what we're doing. It's not the technical term, yada, yada, yada. Let's go ahead and roll this clip.
Great, but so as you talk about plans on the other side, it was this president's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, there was an economic crisis, there was a COVID crisis, there was a climate change crisis, and we're still dealing with a lot of that right now. But the president turned the economy back on. There were businesses that were closed, schools that were closed, and because of the American Rescue Plan, by the way, no Republican voted for that plan, and that plan had $350 billion.
No Republicans voted for it, so who do we get to blame? Who are we going to blame for all this inflation? Joe Biden and the Democrats. You can't blame Republicans. They didn't vote for it. So in terms of their rescue plan they're talking about, this inflation, at least one of the causes, is all due to the Democrat Party. She said it herself without actually saying it.
For public safety, another thing that Republicans talk about, but they actually don't do, and they don't push forward on a policy that will help our law enforcement.
What a lie.
That plan
a lie.
Helped put us in a stronger labor market and help make our economy stronger. And so that is what is happening. It is not the president that has created inflation. There are also outside factors that has led us to where we are today.
If things are going so great, though, then why is it the White House officials are trying to redefine recession?
No, we're not redefining recession.
No, Peter, we love you. No, we're not defining recession. Look at her face. Look, is that something you're going to believe? Oh, my God. I mean, the gaslighting. I've said it numerous times. The White House deals over here and everybody else is dealing with reality and watching everything else unfold that contradicts what the White House is saying and doing. It's really, I mean, the definition of a clown show is this administration.
If we all understand a recession to be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth in a row, and then you have White House officials come up here to say, no, that's not what a recession is. It's something else. How is that not redefining recession?
Because that's not the definition. That is not the definition.
Brian Deese said in 2008, of course, economists have a technical definition, which is of a recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
I can tell you this.
Yesterday he said 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of a recession.
It is
What
not.
changed?
It is not.
Why did he say that
it
was?
is not. I can speak to what he said yesterday in front of all of you, which is the last thing that you just repeated. There are many factors. Economic factors and indicators to consider, and I will say that the textbook definition of recession is not 2 negative quarters of GDP. We have a strong labor market. We have business that's investing. We have consumers that are also very much, investing and purchasing. That is incredibly important. We have 3.6 unemployment. You do not see that in a pre-recession, and you do not see that in a recession. So the factors that we are seeing right now, the economic indicators,
Unbelievable, folks.
does not show that we're in recession. And I'll read, since you gave me some quotes, I'll give you some as well. In 2009, the St. Louis Fed said, while the popular definition of recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative real gross domestic product GDP growth, the NBER, which we have mentioned many times in this room, does not strictly abide by this designation. Instead, the committee broadly defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spreading across the economy, lasting more than a few months. NBER has been around since 1920. I'm going to move on.
She's going to move on because she knows that quote is a terrible quote to utilize, because the NBER, when Trump would utilize it, the Democrats go after him that it wasn't a good use of information or a viable source. So again, they're known to be switching things. I believe it was the Webster Dictionary or the Oxford Dictionary redefined what a woman was into whatever you basically identify as. So you see this type of manipulation from the left all the time, where they're just consistently redefining everything to fit and push a narrative. And that is a dangerous thing to be doing, especially in a civilization and society. And that's why I firmly believe the left, not necessarily the Democrats, but the progressive left, in the redefining of language, manipulating and changing things to push a specific narrative, is going to be one of the main reasons this country collapses from the inside out. Okay, you're gonna hear me talk more about that come this fall, because I have a really important announcement to make this fall in terms of that whole idea. But bear with me on that. We will get there at some point in the future in terms of the destruction that's happening inside this country present day. Well, it wasn't just Peter Doocy taking a shellacking on jean-pierre. This man has been on a roll, and he went after the NEC director, Brian Deese, regarding the economy. I mean, like I said, this man is a showman. He's a true American patriot. He needs to be on the Bald Brad show. I don't know if anybody here has any connections, but can we get the man on the show and just give him the acknowledgement and everything that he deserves and praise here? So another clip of him just completely making another White House official fumble and stutter through their words. Literally. Let's go ahead and roll this one.
Brian, the president's economic advisors were telling us last year that inflation was going to be temporary. That's not true. Now the president's economic advisors are saying there's not going to be a recession. Are you sure?
Well, let me just say this. We look at a range of data. We assess that data, and we lay it out for ourselves and for the president. But you don't have to take our word on this.
But the president does.
On the question, but we also look at what outside analysts are doing. We look at every type of analysis that you could imagine. But let me just highlight. So, Citigroup,
He's taking his time with this one because he doesn't know how to answer it. Because look, the numbers are out. The numbers are showing that we're clearly in a negative GDP. And that is the rule of thumb, the popular definition of what a recession is. And so now he's trying to say, well, we use other sources. We use outside analysts as well. We use outside data. And in a nutshell, he didn't outright say this, but if you play it back and actually listen to what he said, in a nutshell, he's implying, well, we just kind of pick and choose the data that we want to present you. The data that's going to ultimately fit our narrative, which again, is a common theme with this administration, to pick and choose and redefine things and ultimately push a narrative that is false onto the American people.
All the data that I see tells me that the U.S. is on the cusp of a recession. Morgan Stanley, with strong job growth and continued robust final domestic demand and consumption, this economy really does not look particularly recessionary. J.P. Morgan, it is inconceivable for a labor market that has generated close to 500,000 jobs average monthly gains for the past 6 months to be in a recession. So
this data that they're pulling, and I think this is important, is interesting because we're in basically a sphere where certain elements have never existed before, meaning coming out of a pandemic, of course, you're going to see new jobs created. You're going to see an increase in growth in terms of the labor market, in terms of people getting new jobs, developing new jobs, creating new jobs. So yes, that data ultimately wouldn't necessarily be consistent in the past, but because you have this now happening with negative GDP growth, yes, at the same time having an increase of a labor force going back to work, creating new jobs because everything was just shut down, both could be true at the same time. You could have negative GDP growth, utilizing the popular rule of thumb, while at the same time having an increase in the labor market, even though people are still struggling trying to find employment, or in other words, find workers for their job. Let's continue.
So we analyze the data, we look at the data, we understand the significant uncertainties that exist in the global economy, including issues of war, including issues of supply chains. But we also look at what other analysts and outside observers are, and certainly that's something that I know you and your outlets do as well.
So honestly, he didn't really answer the question. Peter Doocy's question was, are you sure? It didn't seem like he was sure. I'll tell you that much. Fumbling, stuttering, didn't seem very confident. Was reading just quotes from CEOs. Since when were like CEOs the all-knowing people, the all-knowing powers of if we're in a recession or not? Well, JP Morgan or, this person said it. Are they an economist? I mean, they're CEOs. I'm not saying they're dumb. But it's like, just because people are spending more money does not necessarily mean we are or are not in a recession. And I like to point out, yes, you have people spending more money, but it's also the reason why things are more expensive. So yes, they're spending more money, but that's because our prices of goods and services are more expensive as well. But they're not going to tell you that with the numbers. They're going to sit there and do all the shady manipulation. If you notice that, it's all shady, it's all weird, but it's a constant theme from the Democrat Party. Look, I'm not saying the Democrats don't do it. Democrats do a lot of things that I mentioned on this show. Republicans do a lot of things that I mentioned on the show, but I think Democrats do it exorbitantly way more, like not even close. So I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.